everyone's happy. This is Chatham House rules, as I've always stated in terms of it. So believe it or not, that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Anna to introduce the audience, which is very different, but I've outlined them. But over to you, Anna, to perhaps kick off proceedings. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Edwin. So welcome, everyone. This is, as Edwin mentioned, a slightly different structure for today's event. We're really delighted to have some key guest listeners on the call today. So I'd love to introduce Hugh Graham, who I've worked with for many years, who is has been a senior property writer for the Times and the Sunday Times since 2011. Hugh is a property expert. He's got a real interest in house building and architecture. And when we met at an event a few weeks ago, well, months ago now, we discussed the forum and how he would love to sit in and listen to some of the issues that are happening on the ground with the SMEs. So that's how this event kind of started. I'd also love to introduce DEFRA and Amelia Humphrey from DEFRA, who's going to be representing the team at that department and also the team at the MHCLG. They are undergoing a very extensive consultation at the moment regarding biodiversity net gain. Some of you will have submitted evidence through the R&B Housebuilding Forum, and also some of you I know submitted evidence individually as well. Their joining is on the back of another call that we had where they were really keen to understand what's business as usual, because usually with these consultations you get the great examples and the terrible examples. So Amelia's really keen to understand how B&G is working in practice day to day on the average site, so that we can really begin to understand what the consultation can do to support SME house builders. We also have the wonderful chair of the APPG for SME house builders that Edwin is secretariat for. We've got Sarah Edwards on the call, MP for Tamworth, who is just the wonderful beacon of light in the political world for the SMEs. Sarah has been a staunch supporter of the people on this forum and also the members of the APPG. So we're delighted that she's taken more time out of her ridiculously busy schedule to be able to join us today and listen to some of the other voices that we have on the forum. And then we also have Ben Bolger, the Executive Director of the King's Foundation, who is joining from Detroit. I understand possibly in his pajamas, but that has not been confirmed. And he will be listening on behalf of the Regional Building Foundation, which is an incredible organisation that we will be setting up early next year, which is going to change the way that we look at placemaking in the UK, and hopefully bring SMEs into the picture, which have previously not been able to participate in the larger placemaking. Oh, are people struggling to hear me? Sorry.
No.
No? Oh, okay.
You're okay.
I think there's some people. Oh, okay, perfect. If you are, I can talk louder, but I've usually been pretty good at projecting. So without further ado, and I don't think I've missed anyone off, without further ado, I'd love to go to some of the SME house builders who I know have always been a really vocal part of the forum. And if we've got Rutu on the line, I believe we should do. Is Rutu on yet? Maybe not.
Yeah, no,
all right.
She is.
She is?
Yeah, she is.
She's just being quiet. Maybe we will come back to Rutu. But Mark White, I saw you join on the call. Are you able to talk a little bit? Because I know you spoke so eloquently at the October APPG meeting that we had regarding your Section 106 issues. Are you able to talk a little bit about those today?
Certainly. Morning, everyone. Bargate, we're an SME based in Hampshire. We're one of the larger SMEs, so we're 20 years old. So my business plan I have running at the moment tries to get us to start 4 new sites each year, which I know is a bit of a luxury position to be in, but you know, I am very, very, very proud and very grateful of what we've achieved over the time. Our biggest struggle at the moment is actually, after having a planning permission, getting boots on the ground very early. And if you let me just embellish for a couple of minutes, there's a site that we've got in Hampshire that we purchased in 2021, submitted a detailed application in July 22. The 106 negotiations were supposed to be off the back of a site we had previously got agreed elsewhere in the same LPA. That took us until February 2025 to get a decision. And then from that to sign the 106, which was signed straight after the committee meeting, we still have not started on site. So we have a condition in there where we need to have a 278 junction in place before we can commence any foundations. And as our local highway authority do take more than enough time to get us through one of those, they won't start the process until you have a decision. So our expected start date is May, June 2026. So you can see from a company that has the ability to buy the land, to actually build the houses, to fund it, it's, even if we go from a decision notice, it's going to take us 18 months to actually break ground. The solution to that will be very much having a standardisation to the Section 106, the pre-commencement conditions, but also bringing highways and other consultees into a better timeline and making them perform within an 8 to 12 week period, which will give us all the chance to guarantee a start date and, you know, make our funders very happy. I think that gives you sort of a very brief overview of my ask for the group, is to, you know, the others on the call will want and rightfully want to fix the demand side. I'm coming at this as a different size SME that needs to actually start 4 sites a year, and to be able to start a site in the next 6 months, I needed to have bought it 5 years ago, and that's just a ridiculous position to be in. Yeah. So thank you.
No, thank you, Mark. That is an incredible position to be in. I think one of the things that I thought would be really useful actually from this call is, obviously we're recording this and we will be sharing it, but we are also going to be collecting some of these examples in written form, and we're going to be sharing these alongside a letter that we're sending to the Chancellor, and we will be publishing them online as well. So if you're happy for all of these examples to be shared, or if you're not happy for these examples to be shared, let me know, otherwise they will be shared.
Sorry, can
Paul,
I just add
did
to
you
that
want to go next, please?
Sorry, Anna, can I quickly just add in?
Sorry, Mark. Yeah.
Just in case there's any rock throwers on the call, it is for 60 units. It's also policy compliant, so it's got 40% social on it. So we've not even tried to. We've had no viability argument. We have gone in with a policy compliant scheme, and it's taken that long. So just in case there was anyone going, oh, you know, SMEs are trying to, you know, get rid of social housing, there's 40% of that is social.
Okay, that's quite incredible, isn't it? A 5-year lag. Paul Heap from Mallard Homes. Did you want to go next, please?
Well,
Hi.
I just wanted to ask Mark. Mark, if your solution is enacted, what's the actual reality of boots on the ground? Can the local authorities actually do what central government will dictate them to do?
Yes, is the short answer to that, because we've got quite a few schemes in the New Forest, and they have they're quite progressive and they want to get building. I think where the LPAs are struggling and where we need to give them the help and give them probably the toolbox is with the consultees. They're certainly New Forest, because again they're pushing for 40% social. The more they can build, the more social housing they can provide to the area. So the head of the council is very on board with our applications. All of ours we have in a pre-app, so we won't go to committee without a recommendation for approval in the first place. It does seem to be the consultees that are slowing the process down.
Okay. Very interesting. Ed Wheaton, hi, how are you? Did you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. So Ed Wheaton, we're Laxton Properties. We're a developer based in Berkhamsted and operating in Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire, that sort of area. I think the danger is that just this becomes a moan fest, isn't it? And we all agree as to the problems. So I'm trying to focus on solutions. And for me, at the smaller end of SME developers, it's a plea perhaps for proportionality in planning. So in terms of examples, we reckon any planning application, whether it's for 5 or 50 houses at the moment, will cost us somewhere between 50 and £250,000. And there's a lack of proportion there. You know, it's silly. You know, the cost and the level of detail and that sort of thing's required. So if I had a plea for government and for the powers that be, it would be to introduce a way of simplifying the planning process, particularly for those smaller sites, so that you're not taking on all of that cost and risk when you don't know what the outcome will be. Interesting to hear Mark talk about a policy compliant scheme, but we've all seen those fail as well. and so you just don't know. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. It feels like a lottery, and a very expensive lottery at that. So it's how to have a proportionate level of detail required for planning applications. Again, we've heard about the consultees that are required to be consulted, and again, the government are making some changes on that, and it's right to acknowledge that. And yet, you know, the level of detail that you need to put in is ridiculous. The timescale that everything takes, again, won't surprise anyone to hear the pain that causes for all of us involved, not just small developers, and the level of engagement. So yeah, how to get to proportionality for the level of detail that's required for small applications, and therefore the time that it takes, and the ability for offices to engage would be my plea, I think.
And with the planning reforms that we've seen coming through, some of the conversation last week on the APPG forum was around, you know, planning officers isn't the answer. Do you agree with that? Do you think it's more the processes that have to be changed rather than the number of people, or is it a question of both?
My instinct is it is both. So if we speak to any officer, you know, and we try and form really good relationships with our officers, they'll all say, look, here's the caseload I've got. I just cannot deal with it all, would be the typical complaint. So I think the number of officers is an important criteria. The process doesn't work. So at the moment, you know, we'll submit some information on flood risk, for example. The officer will bounce it to the LLFA, who will eventually consider it and send the response back to the officer, who will then send the response back to us. We'll look at it and think, well, we think we've answered that already, but we'll send it back to the officer, who sends it back to the LLFA. A half-hour conversation would solve it, but very often either you just cannot have that conversation, or you have to pay for the privilege of doing so. I'll pay every time because, you know, it saves months, but sometimes you just can't do that. You can't get that engagement. So the process, using officers as a post box, is silly. You know, again, they need to be decision making rather than forwarding information left, right, and centre. And so the ability to engage and to have conversations, frankly, has been lost over the last decade. It's very unusual, particularly on small scale sites. Again, I appreciate on larger things you can do a planning performance agreement and pay for the privilege twice because you've paid for the application already. But on smaller sites, that's quite unusual to have that. And so you just don't get any engagement. And therefore, things take forever, and things that could be resolved very quickly are just not resolved.
Thank you, Ed. That's really helpful. Andrew, Cam, hello. I'm coming to your wonderful site tomorrow, I believe, in Surrey. Yes, looking forward to seeing that.
I think I really echo what Ed just said, actually. I was making notes, and it's about the process. We have a massive issue with planners being post boxes. They could easily reduce their workload by actually making decisions. And this goes through planning conditions as well. Everything is consulted. And you've also got consultees, and I'm going to call out one, Surrey Wildlife Trust, who campaign on anti-development to raise funds for them, and will be anti-development, which then causes an issue. And planners now do not, they don't look at it globally, what the planning gain is anymore, and that's gone in the last 10 years. But an improvement in administration and less just waiting for consultees, I think, would reduce the workload for planning officers hugely.
There have been, when we've done some of the surveys, a lot of people have talked about accountability, and I suppose that's wrapped up in it, isn't it? If you can empower planning officers to have more decision-making powers, then there's more accountability as well.
I think the planning officers do still have those powers. They're just scared to make any decision. You know, we had something stupid about a cycle store. Well, it needs to be lit and have a power socket. Yeah, it's on the drawing that I sent to you in July. We're now in October. So we had to resubmit, and then they reconsulted back to Surrey Highways on a drawing they've had since July to show a power socket and a light in a cycle store. Ludicrous. 21-day consultation. So all of those things just take forever, and that's what could be removed.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Hello, Rutu. How are you?
Hi, Anna. Good, thank you. I think, you know, as SMEs and with us as MR property and kind of the luxury end of the market that we tend to build in, you know, the issues that we face, I think very similar to what Ed and Andrew pointed out, are quite similar. And I think we've had, again, issues on the planning front where we've had a site of ours in Ealing, where we've had one element of new build and an element of conversion that we've done as a second phase to the development. And we've found consistently that, you know, statutory timeframes are just very easily missed. And then without any sort of communication or, you know, extensions of time provided. So we end up kind of going through a 12-week process and then almost like an unknown phase. And every round that we've had, for example, with the site has probably run into anywhere between 24, you know, to 35 weeks, you know, from the 12-week decision date that we had. And I think one thing that the government can potentially try and do through, you know, whether through empowerment or increasing capacity within the planning system, is really to try and provide some more predictability. I think our bigger issue on the planning side is that it creates uncertainty, and it's the uncertainty that, you know, is caused by delays in decision that have, you know, other risks for small firms such as ourselves. You know, it could be cost inflation that makes it more difficult to absorb that cost, or any, you know, other regulations that come into play between that time. So really predictability, I think, is more important than speed sometimes. So even a guaranteed 12-week decision timeline would just transform, you know, any sort of SME output. And I think SMEs who knew that they could rely on that would be a lot more confident going into any planning application, because we are ready to build once we get the decision. We're ready to get boots on the ground.
No, that's really interesting. Because at the moment, the 12-week period is there, but then extended. Is that what? Yeah.
Yeah, extended, and it's kind of indefinitely extended.
Yeah.
And I mean, and we end up having to wait even just to get an extension of time date agreed. We might be waiting, you know, a couple of months for that. It's almost like the deadline is almost there, but doesn't necessarily have to be abided by.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. Thank you. James Parkin, hello. You are next. Hi.
Hi, Anna. Just a bit of a reiteration, but I don't want to go over old ground. I think, you know, certainly my request of government, there's been a blurring in the planning process between outline and reserved matters applications, which I think comes back to decision making within the planning authority and stat consultees. We've got online applications going in where the planner is going to the stat consultees for everything, and we're being asked to do phase 2 ground reports and full ecological surveys for an outline consent, which at the end of the day, the planner should be there to look globally and go, do we want houses there or not? It shouldn't be the case. It's a full, almost ends up being a full reserved matters application. And then you're having to wait a year to do your ecological surveys because you put your application in September. So it's coming back to the resource of planning, the stat consultees and process, they've become very much a box ticker, which Ed and Andrew have confirmed. And we're seeing it at the back end because there's no KPIs for planners on condition removal. I've got one scheme where they've put condition in for the LFA to agree that we've done permeable block paving, for Christ's sake. So we're having to get our independent engineer to do a report, to send to the planner, to send to the LFA, to confirm we put block paving in, to send it back to remove the condition for affordable homes before the RP that we're selling to will likely take them. And it's likely to end up, I'm going to end up having to sue the local council because there's no way they can do that in 3 weeks. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the planner is their own worst enemy because they put the condition in the first place. You know, make a decision, reduce your conditions and manage the situation rather than just tick boxes and be an administrator, which they appear to be all they can do at the moment.
Anna,
slight rant over.
Anna, can I just suggest there's some other people's questions that want to answer it, but could we have everybody send some factual and evidence-based stuff on that so we can pull that together to send to the Chancellor so we can share the thing, but then show the evidence of everybody on the call that may want to talk about planning, but I'd like to perhaps move on to maybe Joe Jelly now, if that's okay, from Aspen Homes.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me across. And as Edwin said, and everyone else said, I mean, this is such a vital group for all of us to be able to sort of make our voice heard. And from being part of it for the last 5-6 years, it's amazing how it's grown, and I'm extremely grateful to be a part of it. And certainly grateful for the work Anna and Edwin, especially Sarah, are doing currently. I spoke at the APPG forum last week, and Edwin kindly just asked me to share again an email that I share with our accountants, because obviously we had this long-awaited budget, and you know, there was obviously a lot of fear associated with that. My accountant wrote to me and just sort of simply said, "Oh, it could have been worse, I suppose. What did you make of it?" And here's just a sort of brief extract from my response that I wanted to share. I said, "From my perspective, it could have been worse, but yet again, it fails to inspire and offer hope to entrepreneurs and SMEs looking to grow, as it's our businesses that are getting hit the hardest with new tax plans. In my opinion, Rachel Reeves has continued to stifle the growth of the economy and the country and failed to deliver a budget that could harness growth and expansion, while also giving us confidence as business owners. Unfortunately, it would look as though Rachel Reeves has run out of ideas, and it would appear that they feel the only way to generate revenue is by taxing those who work the hardest. Unlike so many countries, there are no incentives to take risk, grow a business, which ultimately creates employment and spending in the economy. Productivity is an all-time low, and all they are doing unwittingly is disincentivizing the hard-working population, punishing those that are hardest working, who actually bring creativity and productivity to the economy, which is now starting to have far-reaching effects across the country. The time will come when the country runs out of money, as the hard-working people who have propped up the economy won't have anything left to tax. I'm usually a very optimistic person, but I feel if we continue as we are, the country is going to go into turmoil and there'll be anarchy on the streets. The situation has got worse over the last 10 years, and at present we need innovation and ingenuity to get the economy and country running again." So that was just one of the things that Edwin asked me to share, and I'm sure that that's probably felt among many of us who are sat here today. And I just think that's the thing that we really need to take away from this, along other things, and for people to really resonate with those issues. You know, at the end of the day, it was a budget to appease the backbenchers, not the actual hardworking population. I think that's something that we need to look at deeply. I think on top of that, the two other things that I covered was planning and BNG. I won't go into planning anymore. We know there's the distress planning system. We do need to get that resolved. And I think all of us will have enough examples to provide Anna and Edwin with to help with that. And I think the other thing that's massively difficult for us is biodiversity net gain. I think Mark put it quite succinctly that we're all going to have different issues that we're facing. I think by virtue of that, it shows that there are so many issues that we need to deal with, and that is a problem in its own right. And that just shows that at the moment, planning policy that's being brought in is just being brought up in a generic basis. It's not one size fits all. We do need to try and find a system that works for everybody. But BNG for small SMEs, we're a developer based in Guildford, building 5 to 10 units a year. And BNG is the next Sangland for us. It's going to create an absolute diminishing of land value. BNG will, trying to generate BNG on an urban site is very, very difficult. The land value is already exceptionally high. And if you're looking for £50,000 per unit per credit to offset BNG, well, then you're probably going to take 75% of potential SME urban sites out of the equation. It's much easier to do BNG on greenbelt sites where the land value starts at a very base value of maybe £5,000 to £10,000 an acre. When that goes up to £100,000 an acre, you've got a lot more wiggle room. So I think BNG really does need to be looked at for sites that are 10 units or less. It's not that we don't want to help with the environment, we massively do, but at the same time, we've got to have a blend of housing across the UK and across communities. And unfortunately, there's going to be very little SME housing out there on small urban sites if the BNG situation continues as it is. We really do need some form of exemption or some form of adjusted policy that takes account of the situations that we're facing. So I'll try and keep it brief with that. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to chat. And if you need anything else, just let me know.
Oh, thank you, Joe. No, that's really interesting, and I think that's one of the areas in which the consultation is looking at is the small site exemption. So it's really helpful to hear that. Thank you, Joe. Michael Pratt, hello, from Invite Homes in Scotland. Did you want to have a conversation and ask some questions?
Hi, Anna. Yes, I do. Thank you. I don't want to have a rant. I'll take a leaf out of Ed's book, is that we don't want to be on a soapbox today. I think that's important. I'm based up in Dundee in Scotland. And I think some of the speakers already have covered a lot of the points I wanted to make. But I guess one of the things that we have that's a real issue for us being able to turn the tables on the number of houses we're building, which is what I think we're all trying to achieve, is more houses being built in this government term and beyond, as there is a lack of certainty, and it carries through all of the front end as well as the back end. And what I mean by that is that the planning side of things has got a number of issues with it, but I think chief among them is the human behaviour that drives it, is the lack of consequence and lack of accountability. And we all know as developers who risk a lot of money, our own houses as collateral, and our futures with what we're trying to do, is that when we don't do something, or we don't have something happen according to our cash flow forecasts, there's a real consequence to us. That is sadly lacking when it comes to government and local authorities. And we have to change that behaviour, that there has to be consequence for non-performance. I think there's a real disconnect between things like the local development plans, which are meant to set forward policy for each region about what they're trying to achieve, and then not being followed up by planning officers. And what I mean by that is that we've had a number of sites where we've met every single planning policy required of us, and we've still had a long 2 to 3 year wait getting planning approval. And these are things that have already got outline planning. It's down to the subjectivity of planning officers making calls such as, we think your gardens are too big. What happens if someone doesn't mow their lawns? We've got houses that are too far apart when we're looking for density, which contravenes, planning policies around minimum garden space. Sometimes we think planning officers don't even know the planning policies that they're residing over. So I think there needs to be some consequence that if they haven't approved something within a certain time, it should be deemed for approval. Because otherwise, we're never going to get anywhere. As Rutu's already said, you have statutory timelines that are just basically, they don't mean anything. There's no consequence of failing to meet them. And I guess coming back to the point about how many houses we're building each year, as you've probably seen from HBF, is that we're actually seeing a downturn in house building when we need them more than ever. And I think part of this is tied up with something that Edwin will help me out with the name of the chap from Barrett's, who is the director of the land acquisitions, who was saying that SMEs have probably got the best opportunity to increase the number of houses they're building per annum compared to volumetric house builders. But the issue we have is that as a small SME, we have to fund everything, and it's very difficult when you're borrowing lots of money and you don't know when you're going to get planning approval and being able to put spades in the ground. And because of that uncertainty, you have to throttle your cash flow or cut your suit, be able to manage your cash flow within your means. If you've got the opportunity of doing, say, 4 sites a year, but you don't know when any of those sites are going to come off, what you'll end up having to do is cherry pick the ones that are most likely to go ahead, and then either shelve them or sell those sites on because you don't have the cash flow to be able to build them out. And all of that's tied up with the ability to, support your workforce, grow your workforce, bring on apprenticeships. You can't do any of that unless you've got a strategic outline and a strategic forecast of when those sites are going to be available to build on. So all of it comes back to this problem around uncertainty. And unfortunately, I know planners get a pretty rough time of it, but to be fair, they are central to a lot of the problems we have. And I do think that Ed's right that we have got a problem with process as well as not enough planners. But in Scotland, when you see how few people are coming through the planning system to be planners, there's going to be a problem for the foreseeable future. So we need to do something on the process side to cut our cloth to suit, I think.
That's really interesting, Mike. Thank you. I mean, I know we've got some other people with their hands up, but I thought it would be really interesting actually for our guest listeners, because we have got this very large target of the number of homes that we want to build. Could we do a quick poll of the SMEs on the call just to see if any of the house builders are actually looking to build more homes next year than you built this year? If you are looking to build more homes, could you raise your hand, please? So we've got 18, 19. Okay, so we've got about 20 of the 70 odd who are looking to build more, and the rest will not be building more. So it looks like we are going to be, yes, reducing in size as the HBF have said. That's an interesting poll. In terms of next speakers, I know Chris Warner, you had your hand up from Castlethorpe Homes. Hi, Chris. Oh, Chris, we can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Yeah, in terms of asking questions, I think there was a couple of things that others have said. Rutu was talking about consistency and things being disproportionate. And given that we've got DEFRA and we're talking about BNG and things like that on this call, I mean, I've given an example to you and Ed before, but I think it's relevant as to the question at the end of it is why is we had a site of only 4 units. Next door was someone else had a site of 2 units. Effectively, if you drove down the street, you'd see 6 units similar, 4 by me, 2 by somebody else. Both went through planning exactly the same time. We had to, this was pre the 10% BNG requirement, but our BNG requirement was somewhere, I think it was 8.11%. Cost about £45,000 to provide the BNG on our 4 units. Next door, 2 units, 0. So no BNG at all, different planning officers, exactly the same street, same house type, same size, completely different BNG requirements, same site, our side of the road, £220 a square metre sill requirement, opposite side of the road, £80 a square metre sill requirement. We're building 4 units, Crown Ace opposite are building 350 units, and they're having to pay a vastly reduced amount of sill in comparison to us. So in terms of the disproportionate side of it for SMEs, the penalty, my question is why? Why is the same planning authority that was based in Stoke-on-Dean having 2 sites next door to each other with 2 case officers who are supposed to use the same rule book, attributing different BNG, and then why are the local authorities drawing the lines in favour of the PLCs when it comes to sill requirement and penalising the SME? And just talking about the thing that Joe Jelly was talking about stifling growth, we are one of the house builders that we're currently do probably 12, 15 units a year. We could do 50 to 100 units a year. But we've got a site, we've just got planning, 55 units, but it's taken 19 months to get through planning. we've got planning in September. We are now 9th of December. We still don't have a draft Section 106 despite chasing every other day. So that will take us from when we agreed to put the planning in to when we can start on site, 2.5 years and £350,000. So a business that can build 5 times more than I'm currently building, Persimmon couldn't build 5 times more than they're currently building. They're the disproportionate time. So it's the why is the question is, you know, why is the requirement different site to site, house to house, across the street, when we're supposed to have this rule book for everything? So I know I'm not going to get into planning, but there's a consistent rule book. That's the whole idea of having policy. It's a rule book, but it's enforced in a different way. And yeah, just with the media from DEFRA and BNG people on the call, I'd be interested to know why. If I had to do that site on 10% now, I got 8.1. If I had to do that site on 10%, I'd probably lose a unit now. So it seems disproportionately penalising those who can grow consistently quicker is probably my final bit on that.
No, thank you, Chris.
Anna,
that's really
sorry,
helpful.
I just think for the audience, that is such a powerful statement by Chris Warner, and it's worth me stating that again. SME builders can double, triple in size given the right conditions. Taylor Wimpey, and it was Lee Bishop, by the way, who sits on the PLC board, that said that. By his own declaration, they're doing about 10,000. They're only looking to get to about 14,000 over the next few years. If the government and those that are championing or claiming to champion SME house builders create the right environment, the 2,000 or maybe 1,500 SMEs that may be left can double in size. They build 30,000. They could build 100,000 based upon what Chris Warner said. But even if we said double, that will go a huge way to supporting the government not being embarrassed with their 1.5 million target that they've consistently declared. So I think it's worth stating that, because that's such an important ingredient, one, to the survival of SME house builders, but also our desire to support the government. Back to you, Anna. Sorry.
Thank you, Ed.
Anna, sorry, just on that. If we don't grow from our 15-20 unit to 50 plus, we will go under. I'm not over dramatising that for the audience. If we can't grow, we won't survive. Simple as that. So it's that extra cherry on top of that horrible cake we're in. So yeah, that's just the reality of where we are.
Sorry, Anna, just to interject very quickly, because I think Chris's point is exceptionally pertinent, and it's just in line with the poll that you did. I didn't put my hand up in terms of growing more units or growing next year. I think the poll is how we look at it. It's not out of choice that I'm not growing next year. I do want to grow next year. I just haven't got the ability to, because of the constraints that we're feeling at the moment with planning policy, with BNG and the planning system. So I think it's not a case that we don't want to. I desperately need to as well. So just to highlight Chris's point, I think, in terms of that poll, that's what needs to be looked at. Anyway, sorry to interject. Thank you.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you, Joe. I just keep conscious of time. We've got an opportunity for a few more voices. Angus MacDonald, hi. Did you want to go next?
Anna, hi. Thank you very much indeed. I'd love to. I won't go into planning too much, but our average is 5.5 years per site to get through planning, which you all think. My question's about Section 106 affordable housing. And it starts off by saying, how come the housing associations can outbid all of us on buying sites when they get grant funding to deliver affordable housing? It's not correct. We're struggling to sell our Section 106 housing, and when we do, we always sell it at a loss. Something tells me that the grant funding scenario is imbalanced and needs to be redressed, and more to the point is how the HAs value the Section 106 housing, which could easily be modified just by a small amount, which would make them more viable and more appealing to the HAs to bring them on, which would help all of us deliver our sites more economically and more quickly.
Sorry. So in terms of the grant funding, how do you think that should be changed? What kind of amends would you put in place there?
I wouldn't know the answer to that. That's
okay.
Hands of Home England and other experts, other people who may be able to comment. but it's.
I think we've actually got Homes England on the call today, so that's helpful. I'll pick that up with them. Okay.
Anna, can I just,
Yes.
sorry, because something on that I think is really useful for me to maybe share. A lot of developers, small schemes where they have to do a number of affordable, are struggling to get housing associations to want to buy them. One, because a lot of housing associations are strapped on cash at the moment due to maintenance requirements they've got, but also secondly, housing associations don't want small number of units dotted all around their region. So not only does it make lots of small sites unviable for SMEs looking to secure land. So we have wasted land that's not been utilised in great areas for development because the social housing requirement on a small scheme can make it non-viable. But should they even get that, then they don't have housing associations that want to actually buy those properties. And I think that's a really one that we need to catch as well that I've picked up. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed, just to add to that, I think there are a couple of solutions there. One of them is having an agreed method of discounting some of your houses that you build and have no affordable in there, or making a contribution, an appropriate contribution to the council for the affordable and not having any on site. There's this crazy, for us it's a 9 house cut-off, others it'll be 5. But you end up with this no man's land of between 10 and 25 to 30 units, which makes no economic sense for any of us. I got a scheme just through planning and it's just not viable now. When I went into it 5.5 years ago, it worked, but the way it's gone with affordable and general values doesn't work. So it needs addressing. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you, Angus. Stephen Brazier, hello. How are you today?
Yeah, not bad, all things considered. But what I wanted to talk about really is, and many of these points have been touched on before, but it's actually the cumulative impact of all these changes that we've had in the last 5 years. I mean, if it was 1 or 2, then we could handle it and manage it, but when you look at the dynamics of the future home standards, BNG, SDLT, the numerous building regulations, zero carbon, building safety, let alone the dynamic that Ed's mentioned that I was going to touch on as well, the affordable housing, the fact that there are not the housing associations interested in picking up smaller sites. And actually more fundamental dynamics. For example, we need a greater number of smaller sites allocated in local plans. It's very easy for authorities to focus on meeting numbers, which is the driver for everything at the moment, by allocating larger sites, and that really doesn't help SMEs. What we need is something which is adhered to, and there have been targets in the past, but really we need 20% of all allocations on sites below 20 units and perhaps another 10% below 50 units, so that there's a pool of sites that we can get access to. We've obviously all been operating in an environment with high interest rates, which actually have a disproportionate negative effect on SMEs, because we're the ones that borrow money. All the PLCs of note have got plenty of cash, so we've got a whole different dynamic going on, and the regulations and all the additional costs impact us much harder. And even on basic things like planning applications, we're just trying to put a detailed planning application in at the moment for about 10 homes in Surrey Heath, and there are 46 boxes that we need to tick before getting an application registered and validated, and those cumulatively cost us tens of thousands of pounds to be able to tick those boxes. So there are a whole number of hurdles actually, and it's the point I want to make. It's the cumulative effect of those rather than each one of those individually, which has a disproportionate effect on SMEs.
Yeah, the death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly that, yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. That's really helpful to note down. I'm just conscious of time, and I know we've only put an hour in the diary, and we've got 3 more speakers who wanted to share their views. I was also keen to maybe have a few of the guest listeners just share some of their thoughts at the end of the call, if that's okay, just to give them a bit of warning if any of the guest listeners wanted to share their views on what they've heard today. But let's go to Ian Collins first. Hi, Ian. How are you today?
Hi. Well, thank you. Thanks for let me just mention something. Sorry, Ian Collins, Castle Holmes Warwick and IC My Associates. I'm looking at doing a development for 92 in Soley Hall. Basically, I submitted this over a year ago, and I just wanted to draw your attention to a small example regarding BNG. It's taken 12 months to get a response from the ecology department. When I did get the response, I just want to read it out to you now. The submitted BNG assessment provides a baseline only. At outline stage, it is recommended that a draft full metric assessment is produced to demonstrate that the biodiversity mitigation hierarchy has been applied and that the scheme is capable of delivering at least 10% net gain. This is an ex-landfill site that's taken £250,000 worth of investment to get this far just for an outline. And you know, if I refer you back to my report, which I had done by Focus Environmental Consultants, on page 8, the biodiversity gain hierarchy is written out in that statement, in that report that I got done in August of 2024. So literally, we're in a position where I've given them exactly what was needed. And I've now gone back to my consultant and say, how do we deal with this response? And the response is just a draft high-level BNG assessment has been undertaken following the recommendation above, set out within the updated baseline BNG assessment. So that's literally all we can say is, you know, please refer to the report. I think now this will take another 3 months to get a response. I'll probably be a year and a half in, £250,000 worth of investment, and actually no commitment whatsoever of any kind of, you know, promise of any kind of outline or progress at all. But we're continually asked to put more in and more and more and more without any commitment coming back from any other side, even the smallest commitments. But it's just the fact that this has been in a long time now. You know, I had that report written in August 2024, which has that hierarchy in it. And I've just been bounced back with a small comment like that for another 3 months.
Very frustrating. Thanks, Ian. If you could, are you able to share that example with me and the team? That would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And should also apologise as well. I think I'm the only person that didn't get the memo for the cancellation of the festive attire. So.
I am wearing a slightly festive top. Thank you. Andrew, hi.
Hello again. Just going back to your comment, Angus, on the section 106, and I've said this for years, we have a cut-off at 5, but 9 or 10 seems to be a more common cut-off. If we had a tiered system, we would bring sites forward. A few years ago, we developed a site of 9 units. Site should have taken 11 or 12, but it became uneconomic. So there should be a tiered social housing. The second thing is we should have a standard cascade agreement in every section 106, which is written centrally, so we're not arguing over it every time. And those are 2 really simple ways of changing the market for the SME. We don't have that cliff edge, which means we can then bring more houses forward and slightly higher density potentially. And we have the standard cascade. And on smaller sites to capture more. I think many of us on this call, even 5 or 6 houses, would be prepared to pay a small amount of money towards an RP or the local authority, and therefore that the overall sum that the local authorities would get would be the same, if not slightly greater. I think there would be a solution there, so you'd still get more houses being built. And by having the cascades or money or targeting, having certain housing associations that target SMEs, you'd have a lot more houses. You know, I heard a figure of, I think it was 3 billion, I think the HBF, I see Lucy on the call, but the HBF said a year or 2 ago of housing not constructed because the HAs or RPs are not buying the social housing. I've got a scheme at the moment where we've gone to, I think, 24, and I think we've had 19 rejections so far. We're waiting for the last 5, probably rejections, and then we'll go back to the drawing board and see what we do then. So I think that's fairly common for people.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for sharing that. So we're coming up to time now. I was just wondering if any of the listening audience wanted to share some thoughts as to what they've heard today and what might be helpful going forward in terms of information or ideas. Sarah. Hi.
Hello. Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks everyone for obviously sharing the detail and the both concerns and suggestions for how things could be improved. And one of the things that we've been discussing with the APPG and just thinking about, especially for the new year, is some of the things that I think we can start to sort of investigate. One of those particularly that came up was this sort of 12-week planning period that seems to not really have any consequences, or maybe there is some strange reporting around it. So, for example, if somebody just acknowledges your email, then that counts as responding within the 12 weeks. Well, that's actually not what you want. You want the kind of the finality of it. So I think there is some questions to interrogate around the way that the data is being recorded and whether or not these statistics are accurate, because otherwise what we may have is the government thinking that it's not as bad as it actually is, because the data that they're being given doesn't tell the right picture. So I've heard that a number of times, and even in one of my own councils, I raised this that I was having issues where it was basically 12 weeks and everything started again, 12 weeks and everything started again for 3 years for one of my constituents' projects. And so that is something that they're getting to grips with by changing the reporting internally. But that doesn't necessarily change the reporting that they are required to do at sort of a national level. So I'd like us to sort of do a bit of an investigative piece on what that is. And if you have those examples, please send those through, because it will help us to get to the bottom of whether this is a kind of a generic problem, which classically we find. I think spending 2 years now in the role that I do, there seems to be a lot of gaps in the type of data that is collected across multiple departments, not just house building. And so sometimes interrogating what it is that's being collected and whether that's the right data helps to identify why either the wrong policies are being created or the wrong decisions are being made. There's definitely something to be raising around this issue on the Section 106 being sold at a loss. I mean, that's mad. I mean, if we take a completely different sector, the idea of producing milk and selling it at a loss for farmers is obscene, as is for anybody else. It doesn't make any sense. And so that needs to be the type of thing that we are raising and pushing, because otherwise there becomes a question of, well, why isn't there any social housing? Well, who's going to build it? If they're basically becoming more than a charity, they're almost giving things away for free. That doesn't work. It's not a workable, viable financial strategy for any house builder to adopt. And I've been obviously making notes of some of the other things that have come up and that we've discussed as an APPG. So I think once we come back in the new year, we'll be able to sort of take some lines of inquiry. And of course, the BNG is something that we picked up a few months ago. And I'm very grateful that we've got DEFRA on here speaking to a wider selection of voices, because we had a few people that joined us and we put forward some of those challenges. And I think rightly there is a question to be asked about the fact that there isn't a standardized approach to, for example, the cost of BNG for a site. So we don't seem to have a solution that says that it's always X per acre, because that way you might be able to at least predict what the cost is. And the words that were used previously, I think, were that this is an area for ransom, because you are desperately looking for somebody to be able to offset. They know that you need that. And therefore there isn't seemingly very much sort of regulation surrounding that aspect of the requirement that you need to meet. So I'm going to stop there now, but also just wish you all a very sort of happy Christmas and a merry, a very good new year, and hopefully we will be in touch again next year, and we'll do obviously more of these, and keen to do them in person as well in Parliament, because I think they're very successful, and certainly we keep hammering on the door because that's what we need to be doing, especially as I think there is a cumulative issue of many years of not very well coordinated policy that we need to be unpicking and showing that evidence. So I just wanted to thank you all very much, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. Ben, hello. Good morning.
Morning. Just a quick update, which I hope feeds into this discussion, which has been really, really useful. It just compounds a lot of what we kind of know, but gives real examples. So the Regional Building Foundation, for those of you that have been in touch, will go live as sort of April next year, because the funding finishes, the research phase finishes at the end of February, early March. So we're going to set this thing up. We are setting this thing up as a community interest company. Been having some interesting conversations with MHCLG and Homes England and others about what we do. And at the moment, it'll either be, there's the potential for it to be government funded, or it'll be funded through other means. But the focus area is on small sites enabling. And I think it's likely that rather than a kind of one-on-one tailored approach, the small sites enabling program will be more focused on how one gets small sites through the system a lot quicker. So, you know, because it is patently ridiculous. I think what the feedback I've got from the chief planner and others in MHCLG and ministers is that they completely get the thing that the volume builders can't double, triple in size. So this idea of scaling, diversification and growth of SMEs, one, it's delivering a different product, so it's complementary to volume building. It therefore improves absorption rates, because just by building more of the same doesn't necessarily increase the volume of housing. So they kind of know that fact, that diversification is key, and also then the ability to scale for an SME, given the right opportunities to triple, quadruple in size, is not, you know, is possible. So I think the message, that what seems to be happening is the right messages are getting through. It's what you then do about it. So I think, you know, some of the ideas about statutory consultee reform, we've got, as everyone's mentioned, a subjective negotiated planning form. When I sat on the Building Better Commission, after that there was the idea of an attempt on rules-based planning that got completely kicked back. But I think there's a recognition that on small sites, a rules-based planning approach, which is not negotiated, but you have templates that you might have statutory consultee reform, small sites fast track consent relating to a simpler version of codes, because the National Model Design Code created somewhat of a monster. So I think there's an appetite to simplify design coding, and small sites could be a good way of saying what does a Hamlet design code look like, for instance. What are the different things you have? Is there a 14-day period for statutory consultees to get on at the same time? When I reported into government with the large landowner forum, again, there was a real interest in seeing, they realised statutory consultees were a problem, but we were saying that don't just remove regulation, because that's the wrong approach. What you want to do is somehow get rid of conflicting advice, because people are aware that the advice they get on the highways, the advice they get on ecology, you know, it often says exact polar opposites. So you're constantly going round and round in circles, and you actually need people who can make decisions to be in the room at the same time, and actually make it simpler to avoid that conflict. So you need a sequentially proactive process versus, I mean, a simultaneously proactive process versus a simultaneously reactive, which is what we have at the moment, which clearly doesn't work. So I think the long story short is, I know a number of people in this group have sort of expressed an appetite to be part of the Small Sites Enabling Programme. Edwin, Anna, and we can update people on where we're at with the Regional Building Foundation plans. But I think what we'd like to do is get a portfolio of people interested in pilots on small sites to be trying to create these templates, a small site template approach, because I think there was a genuine, I think the government's likely to announce in January as part of planning reform, measures to do with keeping quality. They're fighting a sort of rearguard action, I think, on quality, because there's a drive towards numbers, and as you have a drive towards numbers, that quite often reduces in the lack of quality, whereas SMEs pride themselves in the quality approach. So I think this is all has the potential to be teed up, but we need to move to getting a template between sites and saying this is how you could do it. I think there would be an appetite for an approach that comes up with a solution to small sites enabling.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Ben. Should we ask people to get in touch with us in terms of if they're interested in that then? Great. So yeah, do get in touch with Edwin and myself if you're interested in being part of the Small Sites Enabling Programme. Chris, you had your hand up, Chris Carr, but you've taken it down. Is that because you've got to run away?
No, because DEFRA have got to run away. I think they've apologised.
Oh, they've gone away. Yes, yeah. Amelia had to dash off.
So it was a BNG issue. So I'll leave it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No worries.
If you want to email that through to me, I can share the consultation email address with you, Chris. I've been liaising with them directly.
That's a site, a brownfield site, regeneration site in the centre of Cleethorpes, which is a big old brick pit. That's the development site we're looking to put on there. Because of B&G credits, which I need 1.7 million of credits, on a brownfield site in Cleethorpes, the low value site, I'm now selling the pond as a B&G credits. But the 230 houses that were going on it are now going on a greenfield site on the outside of the town because they can't do it. So it was just a bit of a explanation why B&G isn't working on brownfield sites or small regeneration sites. The cost is so prohibitive.
No. Thank you. I can share Amelia's email with you and we can share that example because I know she would have liked to have had that. I think that's everything, Edwin. I think Hugh's had to dash off as well. I just got a message from him, but I know he'll feed back from the Sunday Times. But thank you everyone for giving us your time and sharing your stories today. It's really important, and I know it's been a really challenging year for so many of us. But I think we've just got to keep knocking on the door. We've just got to keep talking, because the moment you stop is the moment you give up in many ways. So by talking together and continually sharing these stories and our experiences, we are reaching people. You know, we are getting the ministers to listen to what we're doing, and they are coming to our events. They are reading what we're sending them. So I think sometimes it feels like a long road ahead, but we are walking together, and together we will be stronger. Edwin, you wanted to wrap up, I think.
Anna, can I just say that if you hadn't let Edwin speak at all, we would have been finished on time today.
I actually probably agree with that, Michael. It's the only time I've agreed with you. But I guess from my point of view, and Sarah is kindly still on the call, I do describe it that so many SME builders on a life support machine, and I know we need to keep knocking at the door, but the gravity of what we won't be able to recover from, and it does sit on the government's watch, regardless of what may have been done prior to them coming into office. They have heard eloquently, concisely, what this incredible local businesses do for society, and that we do not want, like we've got in supermarkets, 4 supermarkets, and those are the ones we've got. The SME community absolutely are critical and vital to the fabric of the society that we've all enjoyed being part of. So from my point of view, you know, the talking, and I can see that people are saying to me, Ed, forget this, love what you've done on our behalf, but I'm running out of energy and I might not have a business by the time the government gets things sorted and organisations. That is the dire truth. And I don't want to end on a poor note, but we have to be real about what's happening and what's going on up and down the country. So as much as I can sit here and say, come on, we'll keep knocking at the door, we're doing this. For some people that don't know whether they'll be around in January, their whole mindset and emotions are very different to a lot of us on the call, or maybe there's some on the call that are in that plight. So I urge a level of urgency in what we're doing. I'm grateful for people saying that this forum is still grateful that it's running. We do have 300 members. I think if we get 500, which we're looking to get to, there is no government that could ignore this group. No organisation that I want to ignore this group. So on that note, I just want to thank everybody. And I probably want to particularly thank you, Ben Bulger. You're in Detroit, you've had 3 hours sleep, you've managed to get out your pajamas to put a blue shirt on and be part of this. He's one individual I've met that I co-chair the Regional Building Foundation with that absolutely has a purpose greater than himself. And they're very hard to find. And I'm so grateful. And the Regional Building Foundation can be a lifeline, I believe, and can have access and make things happen. And I know Sarah's been at some of the meetings, Sarah Edwards, that is, with Ben and myself, with the Regional Building Foundation. So I urge those that are in a position to shape it, and all of us that need to continue to try and influence our MPs. We've asked lots of you to write to your MPs. We need the more people that are doing it. It makes it embarrassingly difficult, I hope, for organisations, the government, to not act and not support SME builders before it's too late. So, look, have a fantastic Christmas. Thank you, Anna, for doing an incredible job. I take it on my shoulders why we're 15 minutes late, as Michael Pratt has mentioned. Can we please delete him from any future forums, if you don't mind? But no, thank you, everybody. Look, wishing you all an incredible Christmas. I think I can say Christmas. I'm not going to say happy holidays. I'm going to say wishing you all a Merry Christmas. I genuinely wish you and your families have a great Christmas. Thank you for making this forum what it is. We are purely coordinating this. The website is going to be powerful. I've got Anna and my son Aaron championing that. It's going to be a website, and we're going to be doing lots of stuff on there. So we're doing our little bit to get your voices heard and get interviews with some of the founding members of the forum when it was started in March 2020 with 12 of us. So I think credit to you all to have grown this to what it is today. And we will continue, should you want us to continue for this to be a voice for the SME market in the industry with all the various organisations. On that note, thank you to one and all. I think you've been the best guest speakers we've had. I think the audience would agree. So maybe we want to do this. We want to switch it around a little bit more. It's really useful. But all your comments will be captured by us. We'll be sharing that with the audience and that were there from the Sunday Times, DEFRA, the MHCLG, and Sarah and Ben. So all of your voices, I can assure you, have been heard. Please send information through, because evidence-based stuff is really useful. If we can capture that with a summary with all the evidence-based to the Chancellor, I think that makes it far more compelling. And if we've got cases up and down the country, that just really helps the cause and case for us all. So on that note, I'm going to get off and wish you all a lovely Christmas. And again, well done, Anna, for chairing it. So wonderful. I think I am out of a job now in terms of the next forum based upon your performance today. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ed.